All right, we'll get started.
Okay.
Let's start with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord of our lives, please open our hearts and minds as we learn about the authentic love you have called each of us to be and to seek in our future or current spouse. Let us learn how to provide a true gift of self in our sacrificial love for our beloved. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, we have two lessons to cover today. The first one's shorter, and then the second one is about average. So I'll go ahead and get started.
You guys get too hot, let me know. I'll turn it down. It feels warm to me.
Here in the valley of the Colosseum, we find the largest temple of ancient Rome, a temple dedicated to the goddesses Venus and Roma. Venus was the goddess of love and beauty, and was associated with one common pagan understanding of love as eros, that passionate love that suddenly comes upon a person and seeks pleasure.
Hope the internet works.
Well, it was working on a weekend.
Try to refresh.
Is Venus and Roma. Venus was the goddess of love and beauty, and was associated with one common pagan understanding of love as eros, that passionate love that suddenly comes upon a person and seeks pleasure in the beloved. Eros looks inward and focuses on the good feelings and pleasure one experiences in a romantic relationship. But is there something more? Is there something more to love than just emotion and pleasure? True love involves willing the good of the other. It's seeking what's best for the other person. The Bible, in fact, often uses another Greek word to describe love, the word agape, which describes a total, committed, unconditional, and even sacrificial love. So we should ask ourselves in our relationships, do I tend to focus more on eros, on what I get out of the relationship? Or do I focus more on agape and truly seek what's good for the other person? Imagine being in a relationship built on agape. The other person is truly committed to you. They want what's best for you. They're not in it for themselves. But in a relationship built more on eros, the other person isn't really committed to you. They're more committed to what they get out of you, whether it be feelings or pleasure or good times. But what happens when the relationship gets difficult and challenging? When the feelings start to fade and the good times aren't always there? Will the other person really stay with you? Like this ruined temple of Venus, a relationship built on self-seeking love will not stand the test of time. Open your heart and listen to my words. Life from the start. Afraid, insecure, guarded, fear of being alone. That's a picture of what's really going on inside of many people's souls in their romantic relationships. We've tried casual sex. We've tried living together. We've tried doing all we can to avoid having kids. We've even tried walking away from our marriages if they're not working. But are we happier? What the world is telling us about love, sex, and marriage is not working. And in the aftermath, many are left feeling empty, hurt, and wondering, why does this keep happening to me? So Leah, today, many relationships on the outside, whether they're dating relationships or marriages, can look really good, but on the inside, people are experiencing great joy and peace. Why is that?
Well, I can definitely speak to it. I've had many relationships in the past when I was not living according to God's plan for love for me, that looked really great on the outside, but inside, the feelings of fear um, and pain were completely present. And I think that we get into those relationships, or we stay in those relationships that are not living according to God's plan out of fear. We want to be loved so badly that sometimes we'll take an imitation form of it. I mean, there was an actual time where I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I mean, where when I was living with my boyfriend and we had that relationship, and it was just so convoluted with fear and pain, and yet striving for love, but never really getting there. I heard him once say that he's just leasing with the option to buy in terms of our relationship. And I thought, that can't be love. That can't be this type of love that I'm called for. I'm called for someone who wants to be a part of my life, completely, fully committed, faithful. And how he just described it to his friends at the party, just joking around, that just wasn't love for me. And so it got to the point where I had to face it, because I knew I was created for something better. And even though I wasn't quite sure how it was all going to happen, I just knew I needed to at least face the question of, is this really love? Is this really love in this relationship? Or is this use?
So how did you get to this point in your life in this kind of a relationship?
Well, it just happens so fast. I mean, it starts from a very young age, to be honest with you, with relationships being validated by the culture, what's in the magazines and movies. And it sounds cliche to say that, but it's true. I mean, it really is true. It got to the point where my actions in relationships that were leading me further away from God, my impure actions, they were being validated by culture. They were telling me that it was great. I mean, I remember in college, watching the series on TV of Sex and the City and Carrie Bradshaw, and it looked amazing her whole life. And I mean, it sounds pathetic, but it was just like, well, I want that. And I was making choices that I knew weren't in line with God, but the world was telling me it was okay, and that made me feel all right. And so I was just going to kind of go along with a group or with a culture that was going to validate all of my choices, because it made me feel better about where I was. And that just slowly, snowballs into one decision after the next. And before you know it, I found myself in relationships that had nothing to do with love. They had nothing to do with it. I mean, it had everything to do with you. So what you can do for me, where you can get me, what I can get out of this. And it didn't start that way. I mean, it started with, I really want love, I want a fulfilling relationship, a relationship that I'm proud of, that makes me smile even when I'm alone. And instead I got into relationships that made me ashamed, and that I had to look for validation.
So how did things start to change for you?
Well, it's a slow process at times, but there was, for me, at least one defining moment when I had to face that truth. And for me, that happened when I was modeling in New York City. So I was years ago, I was on a reality TV show called America's Next Top Model. After I was on that show, I decided to stay in New York and live in New York and pursue a modeling career. And of course, as I mentioned to you before, my life is not living according to God's plan. Moral compass not pointing due north. I mean, it's just, it's a rough go. And you saw that completely in my relationships. I mean, they were just chaotic in terms of how God wants me to live them. But they were, of course, validated by the world. And so as I was modeling in New York, I was asked to do a photo shoot for an international magazine. And I did, and I was getting ready to be in the shoot. But something happened in that moment for me, in the middle of the photo shoot in New York City, where Christ really touched my heart and helped me see that the way I was living my life, not just modeling and that world, but also my heart, how I was experiencing love or accepting the world's definition of love, and how that was just hurting me and it's not helping me. And God just allowed me to kind of see that dichotomy. And it was in the middle of that photo shoot where I realized I just can't do this anymore. And it wasn't that I wanted to like quit modeling and quit the lifestyle, which was true, but it was more of I just couldn't do sin anymore. I had worked so hard in trying to get sin right, if that's even possible, because I just thought, well, the world's validating me, and if I can just work a little bit harder, have maybe this relationship's not working well because I'm living with him. Maybe I won't move in as soon with the next boyfriend. Whatever it is, I just kept working harder and harder at it, but I just kept getting further and further away from God. And so there was the moment in the photo shoot where I just got touched my heart, and I knew, like, this is not how I want to live anymore. And I walked out of the photo shoot. I walked home, and I did the only thing a girl could do. I called my dad, and he came and got me. My dad drove over 2,000 miles to New York City to come and to pick me up. And the first thing my dad did was he took me to church. He took me to confession, and I was able to pour my heart out to Christ and through the priest in that sacrament of reconciliation. And I realized that was probably the first time in a long time that I experienced true love, authentic love, that I could call upon my dad for help, and he would come and take care of me. And that was the first step for me towards a life in authentic love according to God's plan. It's that first step of just recognizing what's not working and then getting rid of it. Of just realizing that the world is just, it doesn't work. And I was trying so hard at that. But Christ has something for us that does. And it's been proven time and time again that this type of love is true, and it's authentic, and it's real, and it's lasting. And that's the love that I want. And so that first step of just recognizing my own heartache, my own brokenness, my own sinfulness, and then giving all of that to Christ, that was that first step for me to embrace authentic love.
So how did this experience change the way you began to approach relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, it changes everything. Love does that. Christ does that, right? Before, it was selfish. I hate to admit it, but it was so selfish. I was always wanting to get something in for me because I wanted to feel love. So do something for me or give me something. In my heart, that fear was surrounding that. But authentic love it's selfless. I mean, it's desiring the greatest good for the other person, the greatest good for the other person. I mean, just, imagine that, like two people in a relationship and both are wanting the absolute best for the other person according to God's love. I mean, that's beautiful. That's what anybody wants. I'm receiving the love of God. I'm able to give the love of God to others in my relationships. And I'm not ashamed. And I'm not afraid. And I don't have any fear with that. It is beautiful. It's freedom and it's peace. And I didn't know that was really possible. I hoped it would be, but I was so scared that, but what if that's not going to give me what I want? And but it does. I mean, it does. It takes the courage to look at your worldview of love and to see, where it's gone wrong and what we've accepted from the world because we want love, but how that's not fulfilling us. And the courage to take on this new life, to step into the light and really experience what we're made for. It's amazing.
Leah's story is a common one today, and one to which many of us can relate. We all have our own stories about ups and downs in relationships of love, and this gets to the heart of the drama of our lives. We're all made to love and to be loved. In fact, St. John Paul II once said, "Man cannot live without love. His life is senseless if love is not revealed to him." if he does not encounter love, if he does not experience it and make it his own, if he does not participate intimately in it. We are made to love. The very first chapter of the Bible tells us that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and that's the God who is love. So we're made in the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity, whose very inner life is all about total self-giving love. This is the way we're wired, and we're only going to find our fulfillment and happiness in life when we live total self-giving love in our relationship with God and the people in our lives. Now, John Paul II once said that man finds himself only when he makes himself a sincere gift to others. And that challenges us to ask, do I make my life a gift, a sincere gift to others? The Italians have a great expression of love. They have many, but one in particular I really like is ti voglio bene. Ti voglio bene can be translated, I wish you well, I wish you're good, I desire what's best for you. And that gets to the heart of a Catholic understanding of love. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says, to love is to will the good of another. It's to seek what's best for the other person. It's focused not on self, but on the other. The challenge in living out this vision for love is that our modern world gets us to view love not so much in terms of self-giving, giving myself to someone else, but more in terms of self-getting. You could say, what do I get out of this other person? What do I get out of this relationship? And then I tend to view the other person more in terms of what pleasure I derive from them. What fun times or feelings do I get from them? What advantage or benefit is there for me in this relationship? But deep down, we know that if we've ever entered into a relationship like that, a relationship that's more self-centered, it doesn't really work. We might be able to keep up the outward appearances of a happy relationship, but deep down, we're plagued with a feeling of fear or insecurity or jealousy, a feeling that we're just being used or we're being leased with the option to buy. In this and the next few episodes, we're covering topics that are of a particularly personal nature. We need a little time to take all this in. So before we move deeper into the teaching, we're going to conclude now with this reflection. Let's take time to examine our own lives and our relationships, whether it be with a spouse, a boyfriend or girlfriend, or a friend. How much has the world's ways affected those relationships? How much do I view those people more in terms of what they give me? What do I get out of them? Or do I really live out a self-giving love that seeks what's best for them? Let's prayerfully consider ways that we can bring in a Christian understanding of love more into those relationships so that we can live more self-giving love rather than simply pursuing our own self-interest. These reflections will help prepare us so that next time we can go deeper into God's plan for love and relationships.
Okay, so that's the first part. Any thoughts, questions before we go on?
I think that's actually the question. I think right in that the speaker, the guest, she said, I was like, oh, wow, that's true. Because the world accepts all these things that are not good, I guess, for us. And we actually conform our life according to that. It's so good, it's so out there. You know, we don't see stuff like that. That's like kind of like in a pocket, you know, and it's here, right? So it's, I mean, love it, but
Well, there's a lot of people, they don't come out, tell you that viewpoint there.
yeah,
She's
exactly.
given.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the Christian view is countercultural in a way, right? It's the world would have you making choices not aligned with God's view of love, and they're saying, no, we need to be self-giving. You know, we need to want the best for the other person. That's really
That's
the main
the point
message.
too, is how do you know? Okay, so my interpretation of what I think my spouse may both find best may not be the next partner. You know what I mean?
So you still wish you were the best.
Oh, of course, of course. I guess I'm thinking more like giving and, just being that support and just, pleasing and happy, I guess that's my thoughts on that. Is that something, am I thinking differently?
If he doesn't give that back to you, then you feel lost.
I, just to kind of follow what you just said, you often I'll tell you, this is for me, my experience. Sometimes there's been things that's happened during our marriage that I thought would be best for Jessie if we, or I thought she would like something that, and I've learned that it's not always so. In other words, it used to really get me really irritated and annoyed when, for example, I would give her something for Christmas, let's just say, and of course she would say that oh, thank you, but I could tell she didn't really like it. When I really pushed her on it, she said, well, it's just not something I really. And this is not a good example because I'm pursuing what you're saying. I think the more important point is you want the best for the other person. And you think sometimes you know what is best, and you think sometimes you know what they want and what they like. But I've had to learn to, accept that I don't always know what necessarily she really likes, for like a type of shoe. Ladies like shoes. They do. They just like shoes. And 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 I've I've got her shoes that I said, oh, she's gonna love this. She never wears them because, and then she said they hurt, or I don't really like the style or something. But she doesn't want to hurt my feelings. But at the same time, you know, I would get kind of annoyed with her because I felt like, well, you should like this. Now those days are kind of over now because I learned years ago that's not the way to go. That's just not the way to go because all that's going to do is end up you're both going to end up getting hurt. I remember one Christmas, it was terrible. I got so upset. I'm not going to talk long because I got really really upset with her, and that was a terrible. It was just ruined the whole Christmas. This was like 15 or 20 years ago. But anyway, my point is, you want the best for the other person, but you have to keep in mind that you may not necessarily know, but I think what that was talking about was you always want the best for the other person, and you want them to feel fulfilled in what you do for them, and sometimes it's kind of selfish on my part because I'm looking for that acceptance. She's really going to like that, and she doesn't like it. When she doesn't, then now I don't care if I upset her, right? But I don't want to, but so it's just to kind of jump off what I.
And I think it actually
Never
never
mind.
more challenging is that we change all the time. We constantly change.
Yeah, we're constantly changing.
So what may have been really good for us at one point, down the road, it's not anymore.
Right.
So I think that's another challenge.
When I was getting married in the church, my wife and I, they made us go to this like seminar of sorts, and we talked all day about topics like this. And I heard a lot of really interesting things that stuck with me. One of them is that love is not necessarily a feeling; it's a choice that you make. So it's about putting in the effort. Even if you make the mistake, like, okay, I'm putting in the effort to try again or adjust my tactic or whatever else.
Yeah.
So they really stress the fact that One day you're not going to have the butterflies in your stomach anymore, and what do you do about that? That's fine. You just make the choice to keep loving.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mentioned that last class about the whole choice about love. That's different.
It's true. You see so much divorce today, and I think, I mean, just again speaking from my experience, it's not that mine's, not
Because you know love.
oh, of course. And another thing with my wife is, she's Filipino, so there's a cultural thing too
Yeah.
that I've had to learn that.
Right.
I had to learn that's how they respond to certain things, and that's helped me too. And that took a long time, and I'm still learning things. But he's right. Because there's going to be days, and you're married. All of us in here, you're not married yet.
No.
You got a boyfriend.
I have fiance.
Okay.
Beyonce.
There's going to be. You just don't even want to be around the person. You don't even want to. You just, and that's it. It's going to happen. It is. But like you said, it's a choice you make. I'm going to continue to love that person. One of the things I think about, Satan loves nothing more than to see a divorce. He loves nothing more than to drive wedges between people and animosity and anger and yeah.
Any other thoughts, questions? Part 2.
Today, the once magnificent temple of Venus and Roma is lying in ruins. But not all pagan temples ended this way. One of the most famous temples in ancient Rome was the Pantheon, the temple dedicated to all the gods. What's interesting is that when Rome became Christian and rejected paganism, the people didn't destroy the Pantheon. Rather, they transformed it into a Catholic church. And the Holy Mass is celebrated here to this day. So this building that was once dedicated to pagan worship is now dedicated to worship of the one true God. What the Christians did with pagan temples like the Pantheon, God wants to do with our broken lives. This is a key aspect of the Christian life, to be transformed by God's grace. So no matter what mistakes we may have made in the area of love or relationships or even our sexuality, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. No matter what we may have done, no matter how we may have hurt others or hurt ourselves, God wants to heal us. He wants to forgive us. He doesn't want to leave us in ruin. God wants to transform us with His grace so that we can start anew. The Catholic view of sexuality is beautiful. Sex isn't just a physical act, it's a profoundly personal act, one that's meant to draw a man and woman into a deeper union. One key to understanding the Catholic vision of sexuality is to see that what we do in our bodies expresses our souls, our very selves. For example, if someone were to hit you in the face and then say, "I didn't do that, my hand did it," you're probably not going to accept that. Because deep down, we know that what a person does in his body expresses his very self. Now, this has dramatic consequences for our understanding of sexual intercourse. The most intimate physical union two people can have is not just about bodies being joined together. The physical union is meant to express a personal union. Sex is an expression of total love, total trust, total commitment. In giving their bodies to each other, couples are giving their very selves to each other. Do we view sex this way? Do we see sex as a way of deepening personal union and expressing total commitment to our beloved? Or do we approach sex merely as a physical act with someone who happens to give us pleasure? The Catholic Church teaches that sex is about total self-giving love, but there are things we can do with the sexual act that hinder love from growing, that bring division, separation, and isolation in our relationship, and that prevent self-giving and receiving of the other person as a gift. Now, let's take a closer look at God's plan for love and sexuality. First, we're going to see that God created sex to be a total gift of oneself, like Christ's love for us, a love that is free, total, faithful, and fruitful. Second, what happens when sex is taken out of its proper context? Here, we're going to consider some of the ways we use our sexuality in ways that hinder authentic love. This will shed light on why the Catholic Church's teachings on sexuality should not be seen as a long list of no's, but they're about helping us live according to God's plan so that we can say yes to love. As we mentioned before when we were talking about matrimony, our bodily self-giving in the sexual act of marital love is an expression of our complete gift of self to the other in accord with Christ's own gift of himself to the church, which, as you'll recall, must be total, free, faithful, and fruitful. And so our sexual giving to the other, to our spouse in matrimony, is a sign, is the very way by which we love them in accord with Christ's love.
So often in culture, people think of the church's teachings on sexuality as just a list of prohibitions, just a bunch of things you're not allowed to do. I remember one young woman that was getting engaged was asked by her diocese in one sentence to define natural family planning. And she said, oh, that's a way to have sex that meets church requirements. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? But that's all that she had known. It's just the church is just a big no. It's a restrictor of my freedom. But I'd invite you to think of it like this. What do the banks of a river do to the water? Do they restrict its freedom? In a sense, yes. But what is the effect of that? That water becomes more powerful. It can give life to irrigate crops. It can dig the entire Grand Canyon, one of the greatest wonders of the world. Now, what happens when those boundaries crack? When the levees crack, like you saw in Louisiana with Hurricane Katrina, you have a disaster. Instead of this life-giving, powerful river, it just becomes a lifeless swamp. And so one author had said that upon examining Christianity, although it had established a rule and an order, the ultimate purpose of that rule was to give room for good things to run wild. And so the church's teachings on sexuality is not some divine killjoy that God wants to rob us as much as he can of pleasure and fulfillment in life, but rather an invitation to humility, to trust the Father's plan for love in the way that he has created us as both male and female.
The pleasure that comes through sexual activity is a great good. It's given to us by God. But recall that the proper context for the enjoyment of sexual pleasure is within marriage. Marriage, which is supposed to be free, total, faithful, and fruitful. When it happens outside of God's plan for marital love, then it tends to become selfishness. And it leads us into all the kinds of problems that we tend to see in our culture. Sexuality being used outside of marriage, and so destructively.
When it comes to following the Ten Commandments, most people don't have much problem with the majority of them. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Okay, I can do that. I don't covet your neighbor's ox. All right, that's pretty easy. But then when it comes to the topics of sexuality, it gets a bit demanding, and especially in areas of premarital sex, cohabitation. Why is the church opposed to this? Well, let's break down the terms here. Premarital sex. Well, what is sex? Sex is the wedding vows made flesh. So that when a husband and wife stand on the altar, they make these promises that my love for you will be free, it's total, it's faithful, it's life-giving. And they leave the church, they enter the sanctuary of their bedroom. And then on their wedding night, they speak their wedding vows through their bodies. I give my body to you freely. I'm not forcing you. I'm not manipulating it. It's a free gift of self. It is total. I hold back nothing from you, not even my father. It is faithful to you, not just with my body, but with my imagination. It's faithful to you. And it's ordered towards the giving of life, of procreation. And so they're speaking the wedding vows in their body, but when you have this sex outside of marriage, you're speaking a lie in the language of the body. The body is saying one thing, but reality is saying something different. It's saying, I'm totally yours until I'm totally somebody else's. And we're engaging in a life-giving act, but we're afraid of our own fertility, that one of us, we might get pregnant. And so it's a contradiction on words. Now, when it comes to cohabitation, a lot of people blame these couples. Well, you're just lazy and uncommitted and lustful. I don't think it's always the case. I think nowadays a lot of people are scared of marriage because they're scared of divorce, because that's all they knew growing up. And so they want to kind of put their toe into the water gently. Well, I'm afraid to get a divorce, but I want to test this out. But think of it from a woman's perspective. I mean, you girls, you go on one date with a guy. He's a jerk. Okay, breaking up's pretty easy. Now date a guy for 6 months and break up. Okay, it's a little harder. But now you sleep with him. Now you move in with him. And then it dawns on you he's not the right one for you. Do you know how hard it is to let go when you've given away so much? Girls don't want to. They want to stay put, fix the relationship, but it's done before it even begins. And so with cohabitation, some couples think, but how are we going to know if we're compatible with each other? Well, trust me, if you're a guy and she's a girl, you are not compatible in marriage. I figured that out very quickly, that successful marriages are not the fruit of perfect compatibility, but the fruit of the ability to deal with the other's issues that you're not compatible with. It's not about finding the perfect person. It's about learning to love the imperfect person that you've chosen to marry. And I think if we practice the virtue of chastity, of self-mastery, of fidelity to Christ and his church, that practice of sacrificial love is going to build in us all the virtues we need to establish lifelong love. And so the problem with premarital sex and cohabitation is not that you're going too far, but in fact, you're not going far enough. The church is inviting you to a love that is total, complete, life-giving, and forever. And that is the kind of love that our hearts are made for.
Another problem we sometimes see in our culture today is that of contraception, sometimes even within marriage. Remember, we said that the embrace and love of marriage is supposed to be total. And the church speaks of this as being unitive, that is loving, and also procreative, that is apt to giving of life, to being fruitful. And so both of those dimensions of marital love are critically important one to another. And when we frustrate those, place barriers to either loving or fruitfulness in the marital act, then in a very real sense, we're saying no to the procreative, the fruitful dimension of the person, or perhaps also to the love, the total love that I'm supposed to have for this other person, not only in their personal dimension, but in their possibility for giving fruit, for giving children into a family.
Okay, so when someone asks me about contraception, and I don't know where they're at in their faith journey, I usually respond with this. Have you met my husband? And of course they look at me puzzled, but the thing is, I love my husband. I love Ricky. I mean, I want more Ricky in the world. He's a great man. If you met him, you would understand. I mean, that's what marriage is supposed to be. I mean, we even see here, of course, God is, and we're called to marriage to be free, total, faithful, and fruitful. Why would I not want a marriage that has all of those components in it? And of course, that's being open to children, being open to being a co-creator of life. I want that authentic love in my marriage. And I do not want to be used just to fulfill a sexual urge. I mean, that's not love, that's use. And we even see here that the characteristics of use in terms of a relationship and love is the fact that we can feel like we're a slave. It's incomplete, it's unfaithful, and it can be sterile. See, I don't want this love. I want the love that God has for us.
Sometimes when people hear that the church teaches against artificial contraception, they think that the church is teaching that Catholic families should have as many children as they possibly can. What the church actually proposes is something called responsible parenthood. There may be serious reasons why a family may want to limit its size at certain times, reasons like social dislocations, sickness, economic difficulties, when responsible people may decide that it's not the time to have another child. And by using programs that are referred to as natural family planning, one can limit family size, natural family planning, in keeping with God's plan without limiting that free, total, faithful, and fruitful gift of self, not imposing any real limits and accepting God's will if a child should come. And this natural form of limiting family size in a responsible way is in accord with church teaching.
A lot of people ask, isn't natural family planning just basically Catholic Church approved birth control? Well, let's step back for a second and remember what natural family planning is. So in natural family planning, the couple is taught to identify times in the woman's cycle when she's naturally fertile and naturally infertile. And then they just choose which days they want to have intercourse based on which days are fertile or infertile, and if they're trying to get pregnant or avoid pregnancy for a time. So on the surface, the difference between contraception and natural family planning can seem very trivial. But at the heart of the matter, their differences are extreme. Contraception really ends up kind of abusing sex. We say, I want to have sex, I just don't want the responsibility that may come from it. This is dramatically different than natural family planning, where the couple lives recognizing the great gift of sex and the great responsibility that sex sometimes asks of us and a child. And they work their relationship around that. So when a natural family planning couple comes to a day of fertility, they may either choose to embrace that day and the child that may come from it, or they may say, we're not quite ready for a child, so let's wait to a time of infertility and come back together in the sexual embrace. This type of relationship really leads to a much deeper level of intimacy and a greater respect for the gift of our spouse, the gift of our fertility, and the gift of our children.
Natural family planning, also sometimes called NFP, is a proven, reliable form for limiting family size. It does also include the requirement of observing periods of abstinence in your relationship. But rather than limiting the love, it actually provides another opportunity for strengthening our relationship one with another in a different form of self-gift. The gift which observes the need to abstain at this time and to love one's spouse for reasons other than the sexual.
I'm going to make a bit of a bold statement. There's not one woman on the face of the earth who wants to use contraception. No. I think there are plenty of women and men who want to delay pregnancy and not get pregnant right now, but I don't think there's ever been a woman who really wants to be at war with her own body in order to accomplish that. And the beauty of the church's teachings on contraception that I've learned as a husband practicing natural family planning is that my wife's body is perfect. She doesn't need drugs. She doesn't need shots. She doesn't need barriers and chemicals. No, her body doesn't need to be subdued to conform to my desires. My desire is to conform myself to the perfect way that her body has already been created. And the beauty is that God has already created within a woman seasons of fertility and infertility. And all we need to do is listen to the way that God has already marvelously created a woman's body. There's no need to give her chemicals or drugs or pills or any of that's not necessary. What we need to do is practice a little self-mastery and perhaps some wonder in the way that God has created all of his daughters, our wives, our sisters. And so if we step back and acknowledge the beauty of God's plan, we'll realize that, wow, we're getting all upset about contraception when we don't even want to use it in the first place. And so God has already created a perfect design in a woman's body, and our job is just to trust him in his perfect design.
Two other issues we run into sometimes today would be direct sterilization, either of the husband or wife in a relationship, or what's called IVF, or in vitro fertilization. In both cases, the problem is not that we enjoy pleasure in our matrimonial relationships or that we've even generated a baby, certainly, out of in vitro fertilization. The life itself is good, and the love itself is good that we share. But the important principle is that marriage is supposed to be total, faithful, fruitful, in a free gift of self to the other. And insofar as these methods divorce themselves from those principles, they suffer from deficits. But we want to embrace the other fully in a complete gift of self to the other in love.
So the gift of sex in marriage really is meant to bring about these two great gifts that come to the husband and wife. First, their unity, that they feel a deeper and deeper and ever-growing love for each other. And then it also has the potential to bring about a child, which is a great gift. Anytime we start to choose one of those, forsaking the other one, we end up damaging what we're looking for. So let me kind of break this down. Let's look at sterilization for a minute. Sterilization says, I want to continue to have sex with you and grow closer and closer to you. I just want to permanently remove the ability to create children with you. And it's even more extreme than contraception because we remove it completely from the picture. And what ends up happening is we damage the very love and unity we're seeking in sex. On the other end of the spectrum, we have technologies such as in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination. And what these technologies do is they seek to create life, which is good, but at the total expense of the unity between the husband and wife. And they completely remove the sex act from the creation of new human life. This has challenges for a number of reasons. Part of it is that it removes the mystery and the miracle that life is from the loving embrace of husband and wife, where God chooses, when he so wills, to reach in and create a new human life. And it removes baby making from that beauty, that mystery, to a mere scientific experiment, where the husband and wife aren't even often in the room when a new life is created. And the mystery and beauty of that new human life can oftentimes be taken for granted.
Other issues we may run into today, where we stress pleasure over the essential properties of marital love, involve self-gratification, that is turning inward rather than making love that gift of self to the other that it's intended to be by God. And when we separate out the pleasure from true love and true life-giving love in marriage, we run into problems like premarital sex, masturbation, homosexual acts, and a very pervasive problem in our culture today, pornography, which leads many people astray and causes us to look at men or women as objects of desire rather than as the objects of love that God has made them to be.
I often hear the objection, well, what's wrong with looking at porn? I mean, nobody's really getting hurt. Well, let's break down the word. Now, pornography comes from a pair of Greek words, pornographia, meaning the writings or the drawings of the prostitutes. Now, if I'm spending my private time looking at these images, basically of prostitutes, what is that going to do to my capacity to love? I knew of one high school teacher who brought a handful of college guys to her all-girls high school to talk to them about how to practice the faith in college. And it came out that one of these guys looks at pornography. And the teacher said, well, don't you think that that could present some problems in your marriage, that you look at porn? And the guy said, well, no. He was perplexed. He said, why would that be a problem? He said, isn't that what a wife is for? And judging by the seething reaction he got from 30 high school girls who subsequently tore him to pieces, he realized that that's not actually what a wife is for, that marriage is not the fulfillment of porn. Porn is the distortion of authentic human love. And if a man is called to be the initiator of life-giving love, what does porn do to that call? It turns it back in himself. He's either initiating nothing, he's a pansy because he's afraid of rejection, and he's more enticed by these erotic images on his laptop than he is with real-life women and the fear of rejection, or he's caving in and he's afraid to initiate, or instead of initiating love, he's just initiating lust. And what does this do to him as a man? I read one high school girl, I remember she said, I found out my dad looks at porn. She said, I used to look up at him, and now I can't even look at him. I thought he was a better man. And so ultimately it emasculates us. And it's not just a male problem. More and more young women are struggling with it as well. And so what we need to do is step back and realize that God has called us to love. And so when a man is tempted by a sexual image, don't just think, oh, well, sex is bad. No, it's good. And you know that in your heart. And so understand that from the Garden of Eden, the body of the woman was an invitation to love. And so we need to respond to that invitation. So when you see a sexual image, indeed, if it's tempting, turn away, but don't stop there. Intercede for her, pray for her, fast for her. If images of her come back into your mind, flashbacks of sexual images of pornography, don't just shove it into your subconscious. Lift it up to heaven. Because women are not thousands of temptations to hell. They're thousands of reminders of the beauty of heaven. And if we could redeem the way we look at them and remind ourselves that they're inviting us to love, we'll have taken a big step to living in the way that God has called us to live.
Much of what the church teaches in this area of human sexuality can be very challenging, and it's very countercultural in our day and time. Many of us find that we've run afoul of God's plan in a whole host of areas today. And the Catholic Church's message is not one of condemnation in this regard. It's one that invites us into a further understanding and a further embrace of God's plan for marital love. Often it requires slow, gradual steps, but God is a loving Father and waiting for our return and happy to see any signs of love that we might offer. He encourages those with ever greater amounts of grace as we go forward in God's plan of life and love.
Let's step back now and consider the big picture of the Catholic view on sexuality. First, Jesus Christ revealed the fullness of love, a love that is free, total, faithful, and fruitful. He freely chose to give his life for us on the cross, and he gave himself totally, even dying for us. He was completely faithful to us, even when we were not faithful to him. And his love on the cross bore great fruit in the abundant life of salvation. Second, our sexuality in the sacrament of marriage is meant to be a reflection of Christ's love. In the sexual act, a couple's physical union is meant to express a profound personal union. Through the act, the couples say with their bodies, "I give myself to you totally and faithfully, holding nothing back. I give myself to you spiritually, emotionally, and physically, so much so that I'm even willing to embark on the adventure of parenthood with you." Third, when we engage in the sexual act outside of God's plan, sex is no longer a total gift of self. It instead becomes a using of the other person. For example, a man can go through an act which is supposed to say, "I give myself to you," but in reality, he may not truly be committed to his beloved. He just wants the pleasure she can give him. Fourth, what do we do if we have fallen into some sexual sin? Jesus wants to heal us and forgive us and help us move forward in life with him. He does this especially through the sacrament of reconciliation. No matter what we may have done in the past, God wants to bless us now. He wants us to be healed and to experience the fullness of love he offers, even in our sexuality. Jason and Kristalina, we've been looking at the Church's teachings on an array of sexual issues, whether it be contraception or premarital sex or addiction to pornography. And for many people, this could be the first time they're hearing this, and for many of them, they've been struggling in these issues, or maybe not even realizing it was an issue. What words of encouragement might you have to help them if they feel like this is just a mountain of information I just got? I don't know if I can climb this mountain and follow these Church's teachings.
Yeah, I've often heard the expression that the Church is not so much a museum of saints as it is a hospital for sinners. And so if you feel like you're falling into the latter category, you're at home. Because I think a lot of us have this idea that, once I become really, really holy and really, really perfect, then Jesus is going to be there for me. And I'm going to cross that finish line, and that's where he's going to be waiting for me. But it's so unhealthy to think that way, that Christ is with you in the struggle. And there's some wounds that may need to be healed, some addictions that may need to be broken. And Christ isn't waiting for you to be perfect to love you and approve of you. He's with you in the battlefield. So he's with you in the struggle. And to have patience with yourself. St. Francis de Sales, I remember, said, have patience with the whole world, but first of all with yourself. To know that the Church is the family of God, whereby we heal these things that come up to the surface. And the process of sanctification is messy. And we're not standing up here because we've all completed the process, but we're all in hospital beds next to each other. It's giving advice on how we can live this out on a day-to-day basis. And so just to be patient with yourself, come back to the sacrament of reconciliation and just let God complete the good work that he began.
So practically, what does this look like? What are some of the first steps someone should take if they want to redirect their lives and start to follow Jesus' teachings on love and sexuality?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is be not afraid. I think a lot of times our fears paralyze us even from beginning to take the first steps, because we think, well, what if I really do this? What if I really obey the Church? Now, what is my husband going to say? What's going to happen with my girlfriend and I? What's going to happen with this? And all of those fears, Christ wants to meet us there so that we can actually give them to him. And I think if we surrender our fears, then he'll show us where to go from there.
You have to fight the battle. This is your battle alone, but you have to do it with God. It's your battle with God, and he will give you the grace, and he'll give you the strength and everything that you need to overcome the struggles and the difficulties, and even give you the understanding that you need to become close to him, because it can be very difficult at times. But if you're struggling, say that rosary. If the rosary is too much, say Hail Mary. When you have bad thoughts or you want to do something you're not supposed to be doing, just say that Hail Mary in that time of difficulty, and Our Lady truly will be there to help you.
I think the Church has really given us an arsenal of tools, at least when it comes to sexuality issues, that you can fall back on. The rosary, just the names of Jesus and Mary. The moment that you're tempted, just to utter those names, to trace the sign of the cross on your forehead, to hold onto a rosary, to bless yourself with holy water. I mean, there's an ocean of graces that are there waiting for us just to tap into, to realize this isn't a matter of me just pulling myself up by my own bootstraps. But look, I can't do this. I'm weak and I can't do it without you. But you've given me all the graces that are necessary. And part of learning how to be Catholic is learning how to tap into all these riches that we've been blessed with.
And if you do fall, it's okay. That's why we have confession. That's why we have reconciliation, that you can pick yourself up again. And don't be afraid of what you've done in the past, because everybody's a sinner. Nobody's perfect on this earth except Jesus was. And it's okay to have that brokenness, but don't be afraid of it, but try to overcome it and not handicap yourself with it.
And understand, just to remind yourself, it's going to be messy. This is a battle. Battles aren't just black and white, it's done, victory is yours. It's no, you fall on your face, you get hit, you get shot, you get wounded, you go to the physician, you go back out in the field. Like, this is the nature of the Christian life. And there's no dishonor in getting wounded in the battlefield. That's how you get a Purple Heart. The dishonor is when you leave the field of battle and you just wave the white flag and you surrender and you leave the rest of the troops there. And so just to be comfortable with the fact that this is going to be difficult, but that God is there with you in the struggle.
And it's a battle worth fighting for, isn't it?
And die for.
Christy, what would you say to somebody? Let's say they've been living together, living with a boyfriend or girlfriend, or they've engaged in premarital sex. They've done this a long time, and to hear this teaching might be hard. I don't know how to change. Should I even make the change? I've enjoyed this relationship, but what advice would you give them?
Well, I can only take the experience I had in my own life. And one night I was coming home from a party, and I was really sick of the lifestyle that I was living, but I didn't know how to change. I didn't know how to turn my life around. I knew I wanted to. And I was actually driving by an adoration chapel that was attached to the church. And I just pulled in and I thought to myself, I don't know what I'm doing. And I went in, and I remember just kneeling in front of Jesus and just thinking, here I am, Lord. Here I am in my brokenness and my ugliness and my sin. And I remember just looking up saying, help me. I need your help. I can't do this. And I freaked out and I ran out of the adoration chapel just thinking, what did you do? But I did realize in that moment that I wasn't alone, that he really was there with me, and that I could come to him with anything. It didn't matter how bad or how ugly or whatever the case may be, that he was there for me. And that was really a defining moment in my faith, that I did have someone to talk to that would understand and not judge, but would help and just give me the love that I needed. But it was a hard thing to do. But in that experience, I realized you're not alone, and that he's there waiting for you in any situation, no matter what's going on.
Before and after, what do you think was the difference in your life in terms of the way you lived? Relationships, love, sexuality?
Well, I fell a couple times. Again, you don't become a saint overnight. You really think you have to be this perfect saint in order to approach Jesus, and that's when he's going to want you. But I realized that he wants you in your ugliness. He wants you in the brokenness. He wants to heal those wounds, because really you can only go so far on your own before you have to have Jesus help you the rest of the way, because only he can heal certain things in your life.
Was your life better afterwards?
My life's amazing. My life used to be disgusting. My life used to be ugly, and I hated my life. And now it's the complete opposite, that I am living proof that it doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done. It doesn't matter. Jesus doesn't care, but that he wants to love you, and he has a plan for you, and that he wants to give you that peace and joy, and he wants to show that to the world through you, and not to be afraid of what he might take from you, because we get so attached, but give it to him, because it's so much better what he gives back. It doesn't matter if it's a boyfriend, or if you're addicted to alcohol, or whatever the case may be in your life. Give it to him, and he will take it and give you something that the world can never offer you. And it's that peace and that joy and that love and that relationship with him, that you can always count on him. If the entire world turns their back on you, it doesn't matter, because Jesus is waiting for you. He will always be waiting for you, and he will give you the grace, the strength, and the courage to overcome anything that is coming at you. But you just have to go to him. Do not be afraid, because he waits for you.
What the modern world has taught about sex has left many lives in ruin. This mentality has affected practically all of us and the choices we've made in our sexuality. When we've done something wrong in an area so personal and intimate as our sexuality, we feel great remorse. But that feeling is not God condemning us. It's God calling us back to his merciful love and fullness of life. Some of us, however, might try to suppress those guilty feelings. We try to rationalize and convince ourselves we haven't done anything wrong. Everybody else is doing it. What's the big deal? In the Bible, we read about a woman who made some bad choices in her sexuality, a woman caught in adultery. The Jewish leaders brought her to Jesus, but Jesus sent them away and said to the woman, I do not condemn you. But Jesus also called her to change her ways. He said to her, go and sin no more. That same Jesus stands before us with the same two beautiful offers. First, he offers us forgiveness. No matter what we've done in our sexuality, he does not condemn us. He loves us. And if we turn to his merciful love, he will forgive us. But he also offers the challenge to change, to turn away from sin, and to follow him along the path to true love and happiness. Will you turn to Jesus and seek his forgiveness? Will you follow God's plan for true love and self-giving?
All right. It can be a very awkward subject, and it can be a very controversial subject. But any thoughts, questions, or complaints? I think if there's a main point to take away from it, I wrote down that sex is good and natural because it's a reflection of Christ's love. The 4 points total, free, faithful, and fruitful really guide our relationships. Anyone else have any thoughts? I also want to recommend a book. Pope John Paul II wrote Theology of the Body, and it talks about a lot of these subjects.
I feel compelled to say something. And I've given a lot of thought to this because I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I should say it, but I'm going to. Where they were talking about in vitro fertilization. I don't agree with that. I do not agree with that. I kind of understand what they're saying, and I know that's what the I guess the church is saying, and I'm sure I'm probably wrong. I have a hard time accepting that if some women can, and some men for that matter, who want to have children, that's the only way they can have children. We had that. We still couldn't have a child. I mean, we tried and everything. We spent quite a lot of money trying to. Now this was over 30 years ago, over 35 years ago. And I'm not saying that I'm right. I probably am wrong. I know that, and I'm not telling y'all this to influence you one way or the other. I have to be honest, and I have a problem with that because if I was in the same situation, we would do it again. I feel no guilt about it. I feel no compulsion to not to have done it because that was at the time that was we were using what we were told from medical advice that if we were going to have a child, that was going to be the only way because the way my wife's cycles were and the way her ovaries and things like that kind of thing, and because she only had one good, and and so I cannot sit here and not be honest with you and tell you, that I think that's okay. That I don't agree with that because I think if a couple want to have children and they can't have children, and that's the only way that they can have a child or have a chance to have a child, I just don't think Jesus would say no. I just don't think he would.
I brought up a study on this because I heard a number before and I wanted to validate it. But 70% of Catholics do not agree with the stance on IVF. So it's a very controversial subject for sure.
So I was actually so I'm glad you shared that because I thought that was odd that it was in here. I never would have thought that because it's breathing life, and like you said, for those who don't have that ability to naturally, why would it be?
And you both love each other and you want to have a child. And the church really, that's part of the, you can be open to children. To me, that's the epitome of being open to children. So
the two main objections the church raises are separating conception from the marital act, which the video talked about. The video did not talk about that it also creates embryos that are usually discarded or frozen, which is, essentially abortion.
I do agree with that. I mean, if an embryo is created, but in our case, it was not exactly like that. It was, they have to implant the seed into at her at a certain time because her cycles were all over the place, and so I do understand about the creation of embryos and that, and then destroying them. I agree with that part of it because once an what.
I think that they might be told off, but I thought that it was only the ones that were
Viable.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It wasn't that they had.
Trouble is, maybe 6 of them were viable, and they implant 2 and to see if the baby will take, and say they do, and what do they do with the other 4?
I thought that's falling now. So I
No, I don't 6 kids all the way.
Well, no, I thought that the likelihood of all 6 of them would actually, that it would be a natural, that's what I thought.
Yeah. And I'm totally against abortion, period. And I imagine everybody in here is too. I don't know, but anyway, I'm completely against it. But even with that, what you just said, it's a hard thing, You're trying to give the couple a chance to have a child, and then then if more embryos are created, we feel that our faith teaches that is a life and you can't just discard it. But then again, you say, well, wait a minute, let's think about what I don't know. Because I get bogged down in it. I'm not getting into it. I just know what I believe, and I feel like if the couple feels like they want to do that to have a child, I have no problem with it. That's just me.
You do have an exceptionally low number of cases, but it has happened of where the wrong fetus, the wrong embryo has been implanted. For example, sometimes the like let's say you wanted to use your husband's sperm, right? But instead a different sperm sample was used in the first place. So like I said, it's almost like you take God's creation and instead you make it a human science. And I understand some people can, and I get it 100%. I 100% understand that want for children. I 100% get it. But I also think that in a way, because there is a not zero chance that something could happen. I mean, even if you ignore what is done with the remaining embryo, right? You still look at the amount of mistakes that can happen in an exceptionally controlled environment, right? I mean, it's like I said, it's a massive risk, and also because think about even for the man who, the embryo, so the fetus the embryo was implanted inside the woman, right? But now it wasn't used. The husband's sperm wasn't used, right?
So now, essentially, the husband has no connection to that child whatsoever. But it is his wife's child. Yet it has nothing to do with him in the first place. So now you have a baby that's put into a really strange position where he looks like, he or she looks like a mother, which is nothing like a father in the slightest. It doesn't even carry his genes, doesn't carry his blood. It doesn't carry the traditional hallmarks of the family. Now this is different in cases of adoption, right? Because adoption, this is something that's understood, yeah? But this right here is, your wife has a connection to a child, but you have no connection to it.
But that child want and I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That child, that baby, when it's born, say they made a mistake,
mm-hmm.
and it does happen. I was reading just recently about something that happened. It was obvious the husband was not the father, But I can only speak for me. If something like that happened to me, I still love that baby. I still love that baby. We wanted a child.
I know, but there would be a missing piece.
But I think that's something that can be I think that can be overcome.
Yes, I mean, listen, anything can be overcome. But you can overcome an issue, right? But you can't pretend like it still doesn't exist. Just because you accept it, it's fine. But it's still there.
Yeah.
And I think the idea too is it's better to just not run the risk. And also, I think it's in some cases, and none of this sounds terrible, right? Sometimes it is not God's will for you to have a child. And I know that's terrible. That's terrible to say that. But I think maybe God needs you for something else.
Yeah, I agree.
God thinks, okay, maybe if he doesn't have it yet, but maybe I can. But I really need him to do something for me, right?
Yeah. We lost her. She got pregnant. We lost the baby. Didn't know what. Had no nothing happened or anything. We just went to the doctor. The baby's gone. For some reason, it was off. And then after that, that's where we were being led to do this other thing. He said that's really the only way that you even have a chance. And of course, he uses all these statistics and all that. And of course, we were a lot younger then. My wife's almost 10 years older than I am. So we had a biological clock to work to be concerned about. And I knew that when we got married anyway. I told her, if we don't have any kids, then I love her. I want children, but if we can't have any, then we just can't. And just like you say, you have to say, well, maybe it's God's will. A lot of people say, I don't know. I think it probably was. I don't know, but like you say, you don't know what God's thinking. He's thinking way down the road, for things. So, I can only express stuff to y'all based on my experience. It doesn't mean you have to believe it or anything, have those. But I can only tell you based on my experience. And that's the most honest way I know to do it.
And like I said, it's the most controversial subject.
Understandable.
But maybe
Very
one day science will evolve a method that is Catholic approved. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, there are ways to. I mean, there's now they're not like, as you can say, as successful as IVF is, but I know there are Catholic hospitals that have. I forget what it's called. There's a certain thing that they do to try and help your chances of conceiving.
Yeah, my wife has fertility issues, but she's taking a lot of hormone supplements and vitamins, and she goes to a doctor who specializes in this.
Yeah.
So
I don't know what it's called. What's it called?
NAPRO. NAPRO. All right. Any other points from the video that were controversial that we want to discuss? Contraception was the second most contested subject amongst Catholics. Third, I think, is priests being able to marry and being abstinent. So I do recommend that book, Theology of the Body, Pope John Paul II, because it does talk about things like IVF as well. All right, I'm going to maybe skip the first video for now, and we'll hit it if we have time. Let me end this one instead.
Not spoiler, heads up. This is going to be a PG-13 video, maybe PG-15. I'm not sure. You be the judge. But we're talking about sex. So whatever that means for you and your family, just fair warning,
Here we go. Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz, and this is Essential Percent. So we have the 7 sacraments, right? 7 sacraments, right? We have those 7 sacraments are 3 sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, Holy Eucharist, the 2 sacraments of vocation, and 2 sacraments of healing, anointing of the sick, and confession. Okay, campers.
I did.
What is a sacrament? I ask this of my marriage prep couples every time I meet them. Not every time I meet them, but at least once in the course of our meeting. And I've had maybe 5 couples be able to answer that question with a definition that is adequate. And I understand. I'm putting them on the spot in this moment where they're not expecting a pop quiz from the priest in the middle of their marriage prep of, hey, what is the definition of a sacrament? But I'll ask you, what's the definition of a sacrament? There are some really good definitions out there. One helpful, I think, definition is very simple. It's a sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace. A sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace. Okay, so what's grace? Grace is the very life of God, right? So it's sanctifying grace. It's what makes us like God. It makes us holy. It brings us in a relation with God. It brings us closer to God. Sanctifying grace is the grace that transforms us. Without it, we're done, right? We're dead. With it, we become like Him. With it, we become holy. We become saints, essentially. Okay, so that's what a sacrament is. Sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace. When it comes to marriage, it's really interesting because I will always tell our couples this first part, that when you're at the altar, some people will say things like, oh, Father Mike, you married my sister. Like, no, I promise you, I've never married your sister. I'm unmarried. I did not marry anybody. That you know what I mean? You did the wedding. Yes, that's very different. Your sister married your brother-in-law, and your brother-in-law married your sister. The Catholic theology when it comes to matrimony is that the groom gives the sacrament to the bride, and the bride gives the sacrament to the groom. In fact, the 2 ministers of the sacrament are the bride and the groom. So I don't know if you knew that. The priest is there, a deacon is there, the bishop is there to bear witness to that, and to essentially officiate, to be the official witness of the church, to receive their vows, essentially. And the groom says, I, Jack, take you, Jill, to be my wife, etc. And the bride says, I, Jill, take you, Jack, to be my husband, etc. With those words, the power of the Holy Spirit, the sacrament is ratified. Like at the altar, the sacrament is ratified. What I mean by that is it's made real. It's a true and real sacrament. But that's not where it ends, because it's ratified at the altar. But the sacrament is not completed until the sexual embrace. I'm going to stop here for a second. So when you have a couple at the altar, I, Jack, take you, Jill. I, Jill, take you, Jack. Ring on the finger. Okay. That sacrament is real. The 2 have become one. But the sacrament is incomplete until the sexual embrace. When with their bodies, they say what they said with their words at the altar. In fact, the sacrament remains incomplete. I think you could even say it remains invalid until that moment of the sexual embrace. And what that means is an essential part, an essential element of the sacrament of matrimony is the sexual embrace. So when I was in 10th grade or 9th grade, whenever I went through the sacraments course in religious ed, and I was like, oh, this is so boring. I can't believe here we are talking about the saints. I had no idea that an essential part of one of those sacraments was sex. And I think maybe I might have been a little more interested if I had known this. What's the ramifications about this? Well, what the ramifications are incredible. What do I mean? Well, I remember when my parents had their 25th wedding anniversary. The priest came over to the house and they celebrated Mass in the house. They renewed the vows. Beautiful. When my parents a few years ago had their 50th wedding anniversary, I was the priest that got to celebrate the Mass and then receive their renewal of vows. It was beautiful, incredible. But did you realize? And so renewing vows, awesome, super good, well done, gold star, keep it up. But did you realize that every time husband and wife enter into the sexual embrace, they are renewing their wedding vows? That's what's happening. Because at the altar, they say, I am totally yours. I'm freely, fully, faithfully, and fruitfully yours. In the sexual embrace, that's what they're saying again. And they're not simply saying it with words, they're re-participating in the sacrament. In fact, it's like this. You and I, we go to confession because we need grace, right? We become holier. We go to adoration. We go to Mass and receive the grace of the Eucharist because we want to become holier. Did you realize that as often as a husband and wife enter the sexual embrace, this is just what Father Mike is saying. This is what St. Thomas Aquinas had said. Every time, as often as a husband and wife enter the sexual embrace in a state of grace, they are growing in grace and in glory. Which is one of the reasons why I want to have like a book that I could write called How to Get Holy Through Good Sex or something like this, because this blows the mind that this is actually the teaching of the church. Why does the church say that sex is only for marriage? It's not because it's dirty, because it's kind of gross, and so you need to save it for someone you're really special, someone you really love. Like, no, it's because sex is so good. It's actually not just good, it's holy. Not just holy, it is a path to holiness. The sacrament is a sacred sign instituted by Christ that gives grace, that gives the very life of God. And marriage is a sacrament. And the sexual embrace is the renewal of that marital sacrament. As often as a husband and wife enter into the sexual embrace in a state of grace, they are growing in grace. They are growing in glory. This is incredible. This is remarkable. In fact, whenever I tell our couples this, it goes from one hand, which is like, oh my gosh, that's weird. That seems really weird. I don't know if I can they imagine that when it gets to that point in their relationship where they're married and they're having sexual embrace, that they're going to shut the door and say, okay, God, stay outside. We're going to shut the door. We'll open the door for you when we're done. And they're just kind of queasy, kind of squeamish about the idea of like, no, God's participating in this. On the other hand, you have people who are mad. I've had brides who are so mad, like, why didn't they tell us this when I was in high school? Why didn't I hear about this beforehand? Why is the church keeping this so secret? And the answer is, I don't know. It's and not intentionally being kept a secret. This is just the truth. The truth is that as often as a husband and wife enter into the sexual embrace in a state of grace, they are growing in grace and growing in glory. Again, I want to say it. It's like when you go to adoration, when you go to confession, when you go to Mass and receive the grace of God through confession, the grace of God through the Eucharist. Husbands and wives, when you enter into the sexual embrace in a state of grace, you're receiving the grace of God by being a gift of yourself in the name of Jesus to your bride, to your groom. This should transform the way in which husbands and wives approach each other. It changed the way boyfriends and girlfriends and fiancés approach each other as well, because this is one of those things where I can't celebrate the sacrament until the sacrament's been ratified, right? I can't actually consummate the sacrament until the sacrament has been ratified. And so that's why the church says, hey, stay away from premarital sex, not because it's bad, but because it is so incredible that actually it's meant to be the pathway to holiness, not the road to hell. It's meant to be an expression of love, not an expression of mutual self-destruction. It is so good, such a gift. So my invitation is, if you're dating, invite the Lord into those small gestures of affection, those embraces, those kisses. Invite the Lord into that. Hey, Lord, you're part of this. If you're married, to be able to approach your spouse with that sense of, okay, we're actually renewing our vows here. In renewing our vows, we're allowing the Lord to give us a renewed dose of sanctifying grace, his very life that transforms our lives and raises us up to the level of saint. I'm not making this up. I'm telling you, this is incredible. This is hidden. It's a secret teaching of the church, but it's not meant to be a secret. I think just too many of us haven't heard it.
Okay. Questions? Thoughts?
Why is this information on the billboards?
Certainly. I think it really contextualizes things. Okay, anything else? In interest of time, I want to skip to the quizzes, but I recommend writing down the other videos we're going to watch. Watch them on your own time. So first is Catechism Mid-Year 325, Battling for Purity. And the other one is How Does God Restore Us? That's a fun lecture. So there was a lot of information in the lessons since we have two of them. So we'll do the learn, and it's okay to be wrong. We're going to discuss it there. It is too small for me to even read. Bigger. Let's try to do it.
I did.
All right, it's as good as I can get. All right, so this is the first video we watched. Eros love is, select all that are true. Romantic love looks outwards in sacrificial love for the other, looks inward, or focuses on good feelings and pleasure. Remember, they called out two kinds of love. One was eros and one was agape. I would say yes. I'd agree with that.
I like that in sacrificial love.
I appreciate the soundtrack. Eros is, yeah, certainly green. I would probably also say this yellow one looks inward and kind of ambivalent about it.
Okay.
Oh, so let's go back. So I think that's a misspelling, but I think it means romantic love.
Romantic.
And indeed, it says Eros is romantic love, looks inwards and focuses on good feelings and pleasure in romantic relationships. Okay, so it's not that Eros is bad. Eros is a component of love. But if that's the only component that you have and you're missing agape, which I'm sure is the next question, then the love is incomplete. Does that make sense? Okay. Agape love is, select all that are true, total committed love for the other, seeks the good for the other person out of deep love for them, seeks pleasure and good feelings from the other, loves the other person sacrificially. So red, total committed love, I would agree with that. Blue, seeks the good for the other person, I would agree with that. Any thoughts about yellow or green?
It's not yellow. I think the green maybe.
I'd probably add green. Yeah, so remember the first video said love can be defined as total gift, sacrificial. So including both the eros and agape there. What lies does the world tell us about how we should love and seek love? Select all that are true. Love is about passion and sex. Remember, we're looking for what lies, not what truths. Blue is love is about how the other person makes me feel. Sex is how you express love. Or casual sex is okay, and so is birth control. Certainly. That's it. That's potentially controversial, right? Because if it's misguided expression, I would agree with you. But also, if you think about the Father Mike video, right? It is.
Oh,
So I'm half and half on this one. I'm willing to bet it's probably not selected.
I think blue is also.
Love is about how the other person makes me feel. Yeah, that's a lie.
And red and red and red is like that.
Let's see if we look at it.
Oh, it's apples.
So I can understand why, but I could also understand the opposite as well.
I think because for me it's like I feel like you might also be calling it like sexual break. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. CCC 1766 teaches to love is to will the good of another. We didn't watch the video, but I'd say that's a pretty fair statement. What feeling should people who love with agape love not experience? They shouldn't experience insecurity, fulfillment, being used, or jealousy. I hope that they experience fulfillment and not bad things like insecurity, being used, and jealousy. Eros and agape are intrinsically opposed. No, not intrinsically opposed, and neither are both bad. They just need to be in balance. When Eros acts separately from agape, it is selfish and can turn into a using of the other person. And last, when Eros and agape are united in Christ, and Eros love ascends to agape, it is selfless, willing the good of the other. Sweet. All right. I think we came to a conclusion on all those. Now let's do. Okay.
Hey, Marv was happy to do all of these. So check all that wrong, yeah?
The Catholic Church teaches that sex, select all that are true, is appropriate in any committed relationship, is the marital vows made flesh, should only be total and faithful, or should be free, total, faithful, and fruitful.
That's true.
Blue and green.
Yeah, blue because obvious, and green because that's all four of them. Yellow only has two of them, and red is false because not any committed relationship, marriage is the only appropriate time. God created sex and meant for it to be good within the context of marriage. What does the world teach that's incorrect and goes against the teachings of the Catholic Church?
Basically,
Masturbation is okay.
it's everyone.
Sex outside of marriage is okay, but use birth control. Living with someone before marriage decreases the chance for divorce. Or oral isn't sex, so it's okay. Yeah, that sounds right. An interesting stat, living with someone before marriage increases the rate of divorce, actually. Why is premarital sex wrong? Select all that are true. Sexual embrace is meant to be the marriage vows made flesh. If casual, it is not total and faithful. Everyone is doing it, so it must be okay. Or sex is meant to be free, total, faithful, and fruitful.
I'd say it's something the only one is
So,
wrong.
yeah, so I'd agree with red here, right? It's meant to be the marriage vows made flesh. And then this seems true as well. If casual, then it's not total and faithful. Yellow, if everyone is doing it, so it must be okay. And green, sex is meant to be free, total, faithful, and fruitful. That's true. What are the best actions you can take whenever you realize you have committed sexual sin? Select all that are true. Rewrite the script so you can say no and take action a step or two beforehand. Feel guilty and wallow in it. Value your worth as a son or daughter of God and resist pleasure for acceptance. Or repent and go to reconciliation. So what are the best actions that we can take? So repent and go to reconciliation. Yes, that's absolutely. Value your worth and resist pressure for acceptance. Agree with that. Feel guilty and wallow in it. I don't think we should ever do that. And this one's interesting. Rewrite the script so you can say no and take action a step or two before. I think it's trying to say if you find yourself about to be tempted by something, are you able to, what's the right way to say it? Like, remove yourself from the situation so that way the temptation no longer exists.
It's like in that context, but
Yeah.
If
the response is I don't understand the context really.
Yeah.
Right? Because it says what are the best actions you can take whenever you realize you have committed. It's already done. You're not going to rewrite the script once you do it.
I'm going to guess what Mara meant here. NFP, natural family planning, is church birth control. True or false? Well, yes and no at the same time, right? It's a technique for conceiving or not conceiving.
It doesn't have like 98%, you know, like I think my birth control is like 9% effective, right?
Something like that.
And natural family planning probably like 50, 60.
I think it's semantics that they're trying to put here. Maybe they're saying false. NFP, natural family planning, select all that are true. Stands for natural family planning. Give it away. Views the way God created women with times of fertility and infertility. Is against the Catholic Church. Catholics are supposed to have lots of kids. Or the husband and wife practice self-control on when they come together. That's the whole point. I don't know if it was clear in the video, but and I'm not the best scientific-minded person to explain this, but a woman can only become pregnant when she is ovulating, and that's a very narrow window. And so natural family planning says track that, and if you want to have intercourse but not get pregnant, then do it outside of that narrow window. Obviously, there's ineffectiveness that goes with that, and it's not always timeable, but it is a method, and it is not considered contraception. So that's what we got. There are plenty of apps, actually.
like a notification on your phone that you get, hey, you can try today.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. Any questions or disagreements? Thank you for helping get through a very awkward subject. I think we did well.
Good job with that, Tristan.
I would say you could tell it was awkward with the amount of times that I saw Father Schmidt like cut and put the videos back together when he was talking about sexual embrace. I saw like 5 cuts.
Yeah.
You would see his hand go from here and then just fly across to the other side.
It's a hard thing to talk about.
It is.
But pretty important. Thank you, Tristan. Good job.
Thank you.
Sam, Ellie. Sam, come on, Sam. Come on, Sam.
That's my
No
ring.
pressure.
Oh, you're left? Oh, okay.
Leave it alone, Mike.
So I don't do,
Temptation. Here comes the devil.
I don't do, so I'm not drinking anything but water.
Wow.
And,